Let me ask you something that might sting a little. I have built and exited systems in this space. I have sat across the table from strategic buyers. I have watched the exact moment a side income business becomes a sellable asset. And I have watched the exact moment a side hustle collapses when the person running it takes a vacation. What I'm about to give you today is not theory. This is the blueprint I wish I had in year one. And most people in this space will never show it to you because it makes their own content irrelevant. What if everything you've been told about building income on the side, the freelancing, the flipping, the content grind, the agency hamster wheel, what if all of it was designed to keep you busy instead of wealthy? Because I want to talk to the serious people in this community today, not the people looking for a quick win, the architects, the ones who are done trading their most finite resource, time, for a number that resets to zero every single month. I'm moving away from generic side income content entirely. What I'm about to show you is a structural model, a $10 million system blueprint, and I want the professionals watching this right now to tell me in the comments, do you want the blueprint for scale first or the blueprint for total automation? Drop your answer below because your response is going to shape what we build together in this channel over the next 6 months. Now, let's get into this. We don't follow the market. We design the moat. In a world of followers, we are the architects of our own freedom. By the end of this video, you will have the complete structural framework, 3 pillars, the 2026 tech stack, the leverage multiplier, and the specific exit metrics that separates a $10 million sellable asset from a complicated job that happens to pay well. Stay with me through all of it because the section most people skip is the one that contains the number that changes everything. Here is the uncomfortable reality that nobody in the side income space wants to say out loud. The side hustle model as it has been sold to you for the last decade is structurally broken. Not because the people teaching it are dishonest, but because the model itself is built on a foundation that collapses the moment you stop showing up. Think about the math for a second. You're freelancing. You land a client, you do the work, you get paid, then what? You find another client, you do the work again, you get paid again. At no point in that cycle does anything compound. At no point does the asset you are building gain value independently of your continued presence. That is not a business. That is a job with extra steps and worse job security. And before you say it, yes, I know, you've been told to niche down, raise your rates, get retainers, build a personal brand. All of that is conventional wisdom inside a broken model. Raising your hourly rate from $75 to $200 doesn't solve the fundamental architecture problem. It just means the ceiling is slightly higher before you hit it. I want to ask the community something here. What is the side hustle you finally walked away from in 2026? What was the moment you realized it wasn't building anything, it was just consuming you? Drop it in the comments, not to vent, but because your answer is data. Real-world data that tells us exactly where the traps are and which paths are worth mapping. Because here's what changed in 2026 specifically, and this is not hyperbole. The AI shift didn't just automate tasks, it automated the entire value proposition of knowledge-based freelancing. If your income depends on you being the expert in the room, the writer, the designer, the strategist, the analyst, you are now competing with systems that can do that work in seconds, at scale, for a fraction of the cost. The gig economy didn't die, it got commoditized overnight. And this is exactly why the architect model exists. The architect doesn't compete in commoditized markets. The architect builds systems that operate above the commodity layer. The distinction is critical, and I want you to sit with it for a moment. A freelancer sells expertise. An architect builds infrastructure. A freelancer trades time for revenue. An architect builds assets that generate revenue independently of their time. Now let me show you what that actually looks like when it's running. Picture this. It's a Tuesday morning. You're not at your desk. You're not checking a client portal. Your acquisition system identified 3 qualified prospects overnight. They came to you through content that was published 6 months ago, content that an AI workflow continues to distribute on your behalf across channels you haven't manually touched in weeks.
2 of those prospects have already moved themselves through your conversion sequence. 1 booked a call. Your fulfillment team, a 2-person offshore operation that runs entirely on your documented procedures and AI-assisted quality checks, completed 2 client projects while you slept. Your MRR ticked up again. And you didn't do a single hour of work that a client could directly trace back to you. That is not a fantasy. That is what the architect model looks like when all 3 pillars are built and locked. And that is exactly what we're building today. Drop a yes in the comments right now if you're done trading hours for dollars, if you are ready to stop being the engine and start being the engineer, because everything I'm about to walk you through is built on that one philosophical shift. Let's talk about what the architect blueprint actually looks like at its structural level. There are 3 pillars, not 10 steps, not 7 habits, 3 pillars, and they interlock in a very specific way that most people miss because they try to build them sequentially instead of simultaneously. The first pillar is automated acquisition. This is the top of your system. It is the mechanism by which people who need what you offer find you, qualify themselves, and enter your world without you personally reaching out, pitching, or doing any manual prospecting whatsoever. In 2026, automated acquisition is built primarily on 3 things: content distribution at scale using AI-assisted creation, organic search positioning through highly specific long-tail authority content, and a sequenced conversion architecture that moves a stranger from awareness to transaction with minimal human touchpoints. Notice what is not in that list: cold email, LinkedIn DMs, paid ads that require constant optimization, networking events. These are all time-intensive, attention-intensive activities that do not scale. An architect builds the acquisition machine once, optimizes it periodically, and lets it run. The second pillar is decentralized fulfillment. This is where most people's mental model completely breaks down because they assume that if they step away from the work, the quality disappears. That belief is the single most expensive belief you can hold as someone trying to build a scalable income architecture. Decentralized fulfillment means that the delivery of your core value, whatever transformation or outcome your system creates, is systematized, documented, and executable by people or processes that are not you.
In practice, this looks like standard operating procedures so detailed that a competent operator can deliver your outcome at 90% of the quality you would deliver personally. It looks like AI agents handling the cognitive work that used to require your specific expertise. It looks like fractional contractors, offshore operators, and vetted specialists who plug into your system and execute without daily management from you. I want to stop here and ask you something specific. What is the one task in your current work that you wish you could hand off and never touch again? Put it in the comments, because what you're describing is almost certainly the first thing your fulfillment architecture should systematize. Your answer is your starting point. The third pillar is equity preservation. And this is the one that separates the income earners from the wealth builders, because here is a truth that most people in the side income space never confront. If you cannot sell what you've built, you have not built a business. You have built a complicated job. Equity preservation means that at every stage of building your system, you are making decisions with an exit in mind. You are building proprietary processes that have value beyond your personal involvement. You are accumulating data, relationships, and intellectual property that a buyer would pay to acquire. You are structuring your revenue in ways, recurring, predictable, contracted, that make your system attractive to investors or acquirers at multiples that would be impossible with project-based income. Here's what I want you to do right now. In the comments, tell me your current niche or service area. Not vaguely, be specific, because I am going to tell you based on what you write whether what you are doing has the structural characteristics of a high-leverage asset or whether it is a sophisticated trap. I will personally respond to as many as I can in the first hour after this video goes live. That is a commitment. Those 3 pillars, automated acquisition, decentralized fulfillment, equity preservation, are the architecture. Now let's go one level deeper into the material you used to build it.
Now let's get into the mechanics, because the three pillars are the architecture, but the tech stack is the construction material. Let me tell you exactly what I am using in 2026 to manage a system like this, and more importantly, why each piece exists. At the foundation, you need an AI orchestration layer. This is the central nervous system of your operation. In practical terms, this means you have custom AI agents built on top of models like Claude or GPT-4 class systems that are configured with your specific expertise, your communication style, your decision frameworks, and your quality standards. What this means in practice is that the cognitive work you do, the analysis, the writing, the strategy, the client communication, is encoded into a system that can replicate that output without you being present. The agent is not replacing your thinking, it is operationalizing it. There is a meaningful difference. Above that foundation, you need a project and client management layer. This is where I use tools that create workflow automation, tasks being assigned, tracked, and completed without manual intervention. The system knows what needs to happen, when it needs to happen, and what to do if it doesn't happen on schedule. Then you need a distribution and amplification layer. This is where your content, your authority-building material, your acquisition engine gets produced, published, and distributed across channels at a volume and consistency that would be impossible manually. In 2026, a single piece of core content can be intelligently fragmented and distributed in 30 different formats across 20 different platforms without anyone sitting at a desk doing it by hand. Okra asked the community, what automation tools are you currently obsessed with? What's actually working in your stack? Put it in the comments because this community learns from each other, and the collective intelligence in this comments section is genuinely one of the most valuable resources any of us have. But here is the part of the tech stack conversation that almost nobody talks about, and it is the most important part. The tools are not the system. The tools are the chassis. The system is the expertise and decision-making logic you hard-code into those tools. I want to tell you about the moment I understood this at a level that changed how I build everything. I had just finished setting up what I thought was a complete automation stack. Every tool was connected, every workflow was mapped, and then I went offline for 4 days. Not a vacation, just a situation where I was genuinely unreachable. When I came back, I found that the system had done about 40% of what it was supposed to do and completely stalled on the rest. Not because the tools failed, because I had never encoded the decision-making logic that the tools needed in order to act. The tools were waiting for me, from my judgment, my taste, my context, which I had never put in the system. That was the day I stopped thinking about automation as a setup task and started treating it as an intellectual property transfer project. Every decision I make, every judgment call, every quality standard encoded, locked into the agents, made executable without me. That is the work, and most people building automation stacks in 2026 are skipping it entirely. Most people buy software and wait for it to produce results. An architect encodes their intellectual property into the software so that the software becomes a proprietary asset. Your configured AI agents, your custom workflows, your proprietary prompt libraries, your data sets, these are not just productivity tools. They are defensible moats that a competitor cannot easily replicate because they contain your specific expertise encoded at a granular level. Tell me in the comments, what is the one task you wish you could automate forever? The thing that you do on repeat that requires your brain but shouldn't, because the answer you give is almost certainly an entry point into your first custom agent build. Let's talk about leverage, specifically the kind of leverage that makes the $10 billion number I mentioned at the start of this video actually achievable without a team of 100 people or a decade of grinding. I want to stop here and ask you a question that might create some genuine disagreement in the comments, and I want that disagreement because it will tell us something important. Do you believe synthetic media, AI-generated content distributed at scale, is a permanent competitive advantage, or is it a window of opportunity that closes as everyone catches up? Drop your position in the comments, because the answer you give shapes the entire strategy you should be building right now, and I will tell you where I land on it after this section. The leverage multiplier in 2026 is synthetic media combined with distribution protocols. Here's what that means. Traditional marketing requires you to either spend money on ads, which means you are renting attention, or spend time on outreach, which means you are manually extracting attention. Both are expensive in the currency you are most constrained by.
Synthetic media means you create content once using AI-assisted production, and then that content performs on your behalf indefinitely. A well-structured video, a precisely written article, a shareable framework. These are not content pieces, they are acquisition assets. They work while you sleep, they reach people you will never personally encounter, and they compound over time in a way that ad spend and manual outreach never can. Distribution protocols mean that instead of hoping that platform rewards your content, you build a systematic distribution architecture that guarantees reach regardless of platform dynamics. This means owned audiences, email lists, community members, SMS subscribers that you control and can activate on demand. The combination of those two things, synthetic media at scale plus owned distribution, is what replaces a traditional marketing budget in a lean, architect-built operation. And my answer to the question I just asked you, synthetic media is a permanent advantage, not because the tools are rare, but because the expertise encoded into the content will always be the differentiator. The tools democratize, the expertise compounds. I want to challenge you right now. In the comments, describe your unique system in 1 or 2 sentences. What is the specific transformation you create, and what is the mechanism through which you create it? If you can articulate that clearly and concisely, you have the seed of a scalable digital asset. If you cannot, if it requires a paragraph of caveats and explanations, then that is important diagnostic information about where your system still needs structural work. Because here's the pivot point in this blueprint that changes everything. At a certain stage of this build, you stop thinking about daily revenue and you start thinking about enterprise value. And that shift in perspective from what does this make this month to what would this sell for is the cognitive transition that separates income earners from wealth builders. Let's talk about the exit, because everything in this system is designed to build toward one specific outcome, a sellable 8-figure enterprise. And I want to be precise about what 8 figures means in this context, because the number is less important than understanding what creates it. 8 figures, $10 million or more, is not a revenue milestone. It is a valuation milestone. And the valuation of a digital services or software-enabled business in 2026 is based on a specific set of characteristics that sophisticated buyers and investors look for. The first is revenue quality, recurring revenue, subscription revenue, retainer revenue. Contracted annual revenue is valued at 3 to 5 times what project-based or one-time revenue is valued at. If your system generates $50,000 a month in recurring contracted revenue, the enterprise value of that system to a strategic buyer is between $1.5 and $3 million, depending on growth trajectory and other factors. That is the math. 50K MRR run cleanly with low churn and growing, and you are already in a conversation about a 7-figure exit. 150K MRR with the same characteristics moves the conversation to 8 figures. The revenue quality matters more than the revenue size. The second is operator independence. This is the one that most people building systems overlook until too late. A business that requires the founder to be present to function is not a business. It is a highly paid job that happens to have some systems around it. A strategic buyer acquires a system that functions without its original creator. Your goal from day one is to build in a way that makes you structurally unnecessary to the operation. The third is growth trajectory. Investors and acquirers are not buying what your business is today. They're buying what your business is likely to be in 24 to 36 months. A system with strong unit economics, clear acquisition channels, and a proven fulfillment architecture growing at 20 to 30% annually is a fundamentally different asset than a system with the same current revenue but no clear growth mechanism. Now, before I ask you for your freedom number, I'm going to give you mine. Not the number itself, but the framework. The figure I work toward is the one that, invested conservatively at 4% annually, generates enough income to cover my life completely without touching the principal.
For most people in this community, that number is somewhere between $2 and $5 million, depending on cost of living and life structure. That is a $10 million exit at a modest acquisition multiple with conservative post-exit investment. That is not an abstract goal. That is an engineering target. Now, what is your freedom number? Not the number you think sounds impressive, the actual number, the precise amount of capital that would give you complete choice over how you spend your time for the rest of your life. Drop it in the comments because naming it makes it real. It moves it from aspiration to target. Let me walk you through the specific KPIs that 2026 investors and acquirers are prioritizing when they evaluate a business like the one we've been building in this blueprint. Monthly recurring revenue and its trajectory. They want to see MRR, they want to see it growing, and they want to see the churn rate, the percentage of customers who leave each month, below 5%. If your churn is higher than that, you're filling a leaking bucket, and no amount of acquisition spend fixes the underlying problem. Churn is a product signal, not a marketing problem. Fix the product, not the funnel. Customer acquisition cost against lifetime value. Specifically, they want to see a ratio of at least 3-to-1 and ideally 5-to-1 or better. If it costs you $500 to acquire a customer and that customer generates $1,500 in lifetime revenue, you have a viable system. If your CAC and LTV are close to each other, you're running hard to stay in place. This ratio is the single most honest number in your business. It tells you whether your architecture creates value or just moves it around. Gross margin. In a well-structured digital business with decentralized fulfillment, gross margins should be above 60%. If you're below that, you have a cost structure problem, typically in fulfillment, that needs to be engineered out of the system before you're at peak valuation. Gross margin is where the quality of your fulfillment architecture shows up as a financial number. Operator independence score. And yes, serious buyers use metrics like this now. How many days can this business run without you? If the answer is less than 30, you have significant work to do on your fulfillment architecture and your management layer before this system is exit ready. This is not a soft metric. This is the number that determines whether a buyer sees an asset or a job they're being asked to purchase. These four numbers, monthly recurring revenue, CAC versus LTV ratio, gross margin, and operator independence score, are not abstract financials. They are the readout of your architecture. A business with a clean architecture produces clean numbers, and clean numbers produce generational outcomes. Here's the roadmap. Right now, in the comments, I want you to write the first version of your system in one sentence. Not the perfect version, the first version.
The one that you could start building this week with the resources you currently have. Then in the replies, I want the people who are further along in this community to give feedback, add context, push back, sharpen the thinking. The architects in this community who have been building on this framework, the ones who responded to earlier videos with their system one-liners and got feedback in the comments, they are not waiting for perfect. They are building in public. They are iterating in the open. And that approach, that willingness to put an unfinished version of a system into the world and let the community sharpen it, is how the fastest moving architects in this space are compressing years of learning into months of action. Because that is what this community is for. We are not a passive audience. We are a collective of architects who build in public, who challenge each other's frameworks, and who hold each other accountable to the work. The transition from $10,000 months to $10 million in enterprise value is not a single leap. It is a sequence of structural decisions, each one building on the last, each one compounding in value over time. But it starts with the same shift it always starts with, the decision to stop building income and start building assets. That decision is not made once. It is made every day. Every time you choose to document a process instead of just doing the task. Every time you choose to build a system instead of just completing a project. Every time you choose operator leverage instead of personal effort. Here's where I want to land before we close out this video. The $10 million system blueprint is not a fantasy. It is an engineering problem. And like every engineering problem, it has specific inputs, specific constraints, and specific outputs. What I've given you today is the structural framework, the three pillars, the tech stack architecture, the leverage multipliers, the exit metrics, the KPIs. That is the blueprint.
But a blueprint without a builder is just paper. Here is the insight I want to leave you with, the one you only earn by staying through the entire video. The biggest competitive advantage in this system is not the AI tools, it's not the distribution protocols, it's not even the fulfillment architecture. It is the willingness to make your system legible, to document it, to commit it to paper, to SOPs, to agent configurations, to clear processes, so clearly that someone who's never met you could run it. Most people never do that. They carry their system in their head because it feels safer, more irreplaceable. But the moment you externalize your expertise, the moment your intellectual capital lives in the system instead of in you, is the moment your business becomes an asset. That is the transition, and it's available to you starting today. So here's what I'm asking from you before you click away from this video. First, drop your answer to the original question in the comments. Scale blueprint first or automation blueprint first? Your vote shapes the next 6 months of content on this channel. This is not performative engagement. Your input is the editorial calendar. Second, write your one-sentence system description. Where are you in the build? What is the core transformation your architecture creates? Give it to the community and let us sharpen it with you. Third, name your freedom number. Make it real, anchor it to a specific figure, and let this community hold you to it. And if you're watching this and you haven't subscribed yet, hit subscribe. The next video in this series is the one where we go hands-on with the actual tech stack build, the agent configuration, the workflow architecture, the specific tools in the order you install them. If you want to be there for that, you know what to do. Because the people who build 8-figure systems are not the ones who had the best ideas. They are the ones who showed up in the comments, engaged with the frameworks, challenged their own assumptions, and built in public with a community of people who were doing the same. We are the architects, and we build. I'll see you in the next blueprint.